Hi there, all of you. So my name is Catherine Weinberg, and I'm the CEO of Fotola. I'm particularly passionate about growing the economy and creating jobs by building businesses that last. I do that working with a partnership of growth specialists that are there to build businesses that last. And that means resilient, reputable, and reliable suppliers, those businesses that underpin the core of the economy. Collaboration is also really key and really part of who we are, and it's with that that we are the co-founders of the Supplier Development Awards. The intention of these awards is to acknowledge excellence, to share case studies, share learning, foster best practice, and particularly to encourage collaboration. Because the reality is, in South Africa, we have a huge challenge ahead of us. And we need to be bold enough to look at doing things differently, stepping out of our comfort zones, stepping away from our own silos, and reaching out to join hands and find different ways to collaborate and really change things up at scale. And so it's with that in mind that we launched today's Insiders Track, really with a collective of people who are leaders in business, leaders in transformation, in procurement, and of course in supply development, but also welcoming small suppliers themselves, because it's that engagement with the small suppliers that allows us to really unlock the potential of supply development as a growth tool in South Africa. Before we get started, I'd like to tip my hat to ABSA. They are the sponsors of the ABSA Business Day Supply Development Awards and have walked with us a long journey, 4 years now, and really have made a difference and brought this, have been able to bring this awards event to light. ABSA play an important role in supporting the growth of their own suppliers and in providing finance to suppliers from other corporates, and so play a very significant role in the economy, achieving exactly what we're all trying to aim at. So today I'm really delighted to be able to share two fabulous case studies. They're quite different. The first one is about the way to scale impact through working with small suppliers, a number of small suppliers, and the second case is one that's really focused on building one particular scalable supplier. And so maybe without further ado, I'd like to introduce Henry Mateus. He's the senior manager for social impact and economic development at the Waterfront. I want to say, Henry, I've been a fan of the Waterfront for a long time. You really do lead the retail sector. You put in practice what you speak about, and I think that there's lots of lessons for the retail sector that people can learn from you. But in today's particular case, we're looking, if you can give us an overview of who you are and why you're amazing, but more than that, we're going to just engage in a little bit of detail your strategy for bringing on board small suppliers, and particularly the elements of compliance and ethics that is so dear to the way that you're working. Over to you, Henry.
Good morning, Catherine, and thank you for those kind words. Thank you for having us here today. I hope I do your kind words justice today. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Henry. I'm responsible for socioeconomic development at the V&A Waterfront, and I'll be sharing with you today a case study on why compliance is important for the small businesses across our precinct. I'll start by just contextualizing who and what the V&A Waterfront is, go through a little bit about our strategy, and then I've got two fantastic, amazing entrepreneurs, Helen Gibbs and Ashra Adams, joining us today. And we'll be featuring their businesses and really how they've utilized the COVID-19 pandemic to really look at alternative markets and take adversity and smash it and grow their businesses during this period as well. But before we start, let me start by giving you guys a little bit of context about who and what the V&A Waterfront is. People often recognize us as the shopping center, the Victoria Wharf, when in actual fact we a property development enabled within the city of Cape Town. We own and manage approximately 123 hectares of land with 24,000 people that live and work on the precinct every day. And we've got 800 tenants, 450 of which are small businesses in a variety of sectors. We are also the #1 destination on the continent, with 24 million people that visit the V&A waterfront every year. And what that no doubt means is market access. And we take particular care about who gets access to that market, and how we empower particularly emerging and micro enterprises to get access to that market, both in the form of consumers as well as in the supply chains across our precinct. Nominally, we're responsible for approximately 2% of the GDP across the Western Cape. That amounts to approximately 37 billion rand contribution to the economy. At the heart of what makes us who we are is job creation and economic development. Running a precinct is the joy that brings it to life, but what gives us a license to operate is going to government to say we're ready to build, we want to grow the economy. At the heart of it is job creation. We're a space that welcomes inclusivity, and we give as much care for the spaces in between the buildings as we do for the buildings themselves. The buildings account for 23% of our land mass, but those spaces in between, the 68% of our land mass, is really the reason why people visit the V&A waterfront. And it's critical for us to ensure we put high priority to giving consumers and visitors to the waterfront on a daily basis that magical experience. We focus tremendously on breaking down barriers to access our supply chain as well as the market opportunity across our precinct. And one such example of one of the many programs we have in place across our precinct is our Joy from Africa to the World campaign. Traditionally, you would see a shopping center decked out at the end of the year with lots of tinsel and plastic and Father Christmas statues, when our marketing department really looked at what was a major procurement opportunity and looked at how we diversify that procurement opportunity. Instead of going to one major supplier who was generally importing most of the products from China, we were able to bring an additional 15 local craft and design businesses with a total of 150 crafters to access that market opportunity. At the same time, looking at the assets we have across our precinct, leveraging some of our small businesses within the craft and design sector to also take use of that opportunity in our supply chain, and in the end diverting 1.5 million rand to those small suppliers as well. But then came March 2020. We were on a fantastic upward trend, and being as exposed to the international market as we went from approximately 60 to 80,000 visitors a day right down to 3,000 visitors a day. And this impact was acutely felt by small businesses. You know, some of the big guys had the ability and the wiggle room to save, but our micro enterprises within our supply chain, the micro enterprises across our precinct, are the ones who were impacted the most. Our business strategy really enabled us to think a little bit outside the box about what the principles are that guide how we're going to sort of protect those most vulnerable across our precinct. It was incredibly important for us to remain calm and protect those most vulnerable, utilizing assets across our precinct. We've got a concentration of businesses in, for instance, our Workshop 17 shared working space, working within the technology, innovation, accounting and legal practices. And we really utilize them to build some of the resilience factors into some of our small businesses in other sectors, such as the craft and design sector. People would often be surprised to know that we've got a number of informal businesses that trade across our precinct that did not necessarily have access to the relief measures put in place by government. And so it was incredibly important for us to ensure that we put those technical services, make those technical services available, and build effective measures to provide relief for small businesses. And that relief came primarily in the form of rental relief. We provided in excess of 20 million rands relief just to the small business sector. We very quickly got up and running, like many other businesses, an SME portal where we housed resources, news and information, We partnered with a number of our partners across the precinct in public and private sector to provide a whole range of webinars and partnerships. But critically, we took the bold decision to make working capital available to those SMMEs, and we provided those in the form of non-interest bearing loans with at least a 2-year payment holiday to give them a chance to regrow as the impact of this pandemic is sustained. But critically, what we're here to talk about today is that element at the bottom, the work we were able to achieve through our SMME help desk. And here we were really able to leverage the relationships we have to build that resilience into the small businesses. So lots of technical services that we provided. Tax support, getting businesses compliant with SARS, registering your business. It was a fascinating insight to see how many businesses were registered, had their compensation fund clearance in place, business licenses and trading licenses. So it gave us a unique opportunity to leverage off from this pandemic and ensure that we build that resilience factor into our small businesses. I think what's critical to understand is that, and I think we all know this, is that the COVID-19 pandemic is not going to be the last serious break, economic disruption that small businesses will need to face. So it really gives us, it's heartwarming for us that we know that we're building these resilience factors into our small businesses. And the 2 examples that I'm going to talk about today, one had their compliance in place, and we'll be able to see what that enabled for Helen Gibbs, and one, Ashra, a traditional informal flower shop business, and we were able to utilize this period to get the business compliant, and we'll talk about some of the market access opportunities that came from that. I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome Helen up and ask Helen a question or two that relates to her journey during the COVID-19 pandemic. And when I spoke to Helen this week, we just talked about sort of the reality of the impact that this pandemic is still having on small businesses, and we don't want to just paint a rosy picture that Helen is out of the woods. But Helen, you have a beautiful craft studio. We see some of those beautiful designs behind you over there. You've distinguished yourself as a local and ethical sourcer. You use sustainable natural fibers and textiles. Can you just explain to us a little bit about why these principles are so important to you and how they help your business to position itself into the future?
Thank you, Henry. So basically what's happening these days is, these are catchphrases that people have caught onto: sustainability, ethics. But since 1995, when we started Helen Mellon, that is what I've built my business on. And I think that gives us a lot of traction. People are aware that our quality is amazing. So that does help you grow a business when you're strong on your ethics and you bring sustainability to the forefront, true sustainability.
Absolutely. So coming to Ashra now, and this is the really fantastic part, and when you see a business growing, Ashra's been operating Mama's Flower Shop at the V&A Waterfront since 1992 when the Vic Wharf opened. But this is an intergenerational business. She is about the 3rd generation to take the business over, and like many businesses in the country, has run a very informal business. Ashra, you didn't have your business registered up until this year. You ran a flower shop. COVID-19 hit. Tell me about the impact that COVID has had on your business and how those support services perhaps helped you to access additional market opportunities.
Yes, Indre, as we all know, a date that we will never forget is March 2020, when the president announced that we're going to hit level 5. Certain businesses was affected, not as heavy as the others. Some couldn't trade at all, and unfortunately I was one of those that couldn't trade. It was devastated because the first thing that I was worried about was my workers, my children, my family. However, I was also fortunate on the other side that the community supported us because they know we've been in this trade for many, many years, because I've been at the waterfront for 30 years. And the community then supported us because it was still our funerals, it was still our weddings, our birthdays, and our new births. So people could order flowers from us. But I was devastated because I was more worried about my workers. What's going to happen to them? And then few months later, however, the waterfront management was always in contact with us, also worried about myself and my family, my workers. We came up with a plan as how to, we will still remain at the waterfront, looking at our rental and stuff like that. However, when management called me to say they would like to speak to me and support us in terms of financial support, you know, how we can move forward, that was a big wow to me, because now they gave me the opportunity to move forward, to support the workers more better, and it gave me opportunity to think differently, you know, how I can structure my business differently as well. Yeah. Yes, and that was one of the key aspects. Management supported us, even though the pandemic still continued. However, we couldn't trade, and the levels dropped down till we can come back to the waterfront as well.
Yeah, Ashra, so I remember at the time you used the services of Hamida, Ideline accounting practices to get your business compliant. The business was registered. Can you share with us sort of where you are now? I know for a fact you've been able to open additional market access opportunities. What did that enable for you?
Yes, I was referred to the experts by the waterfront, where I could register my business, because I was very small informal business at the time, and then the experts then helped me and assist me to register my business and become more compliant, where I could then register my workers in terms of UIF and all that, get my tax clearances, because when I was approached by the spa retailers to supply them with flowers, and most of the bigger retailers prefer that your business be registered when you do supply them. And that just opened more doors for me, so that I can now supply 5 spa outlets with my proteas that I can fetch myself at the farmers as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ashra. Helen, I maybe just want to come back to you for a quick last question to your side. We know that mental well-being was a big challenge over this period. Ethical practices goes beyond just production and sourcing. Ethical practices goes towards how you treat people in your entity as well. Could you share a little bit about that experience and how you came through this pandemic with your staff members?
So for my staff, it was just as difficult to try and comprehend as it was for myself. I was very fortunate at that stage to have always maintained that I've got to be compliant with absolutely everything. I fear that, you know, something dreadful could happen to us. I don't want my business to close for being, you know, silly. So I managed to get all the funding that we could get, even though I did lose a few staff members, because they preferred to actually be at home and earn their TERS and sit at home than be at work and earn the TERS. We had difficult times, but I must just say, if we get back to how we all moved through everything, I think we did it all quite smoothly. I think those staff members are quite happy. And then the staff that have remained, we're a good team. We're getting it all back together. I think we're all going to remain positive now and work towards growth, small steps, but keep the growth going.
Great. Thank you very much, Helen. Catherine, with that, I hope I was able to give everybody just a little bit of a snapshot. 2 small case studies of what happened at quite a large scale across our precinct, with approximately 400 businesses that we have an engaged relationship with. And for us, it was really an opportunity to build up, I suppose, the critical part for us, resilience into the future, and ensuring our businesses are able to survive into brighter times as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Helen and Asha, for really bringing the human face of the supply chain to us. I think for me, there's 2 key things come out of this. Helen, it's your thing about consumer power. So you say since 1995, you've been about sustainability. It's something that's really core to your own ethics. I think what's so interesting in the world now is consumer power is really raising, and consumers are actually becoming the drivers or whether they purchase from the shop. So I think that's a very interesting key component of that discussion. And Asha, you know, as a long-time small business owner myself and working with many thousands of small businesses around the country, we all know red tape and compliance is the last thing that we really want to do. And so I love that example, that when you did get it right, it unlocked huge opportunities for growth for you. So I think, thank you so much for Henry and your team for that insight. I'd like maybe to go now to our specialist panel for some comment. Tiamo Makolane, head of Group Procurement, Risk and Government at ABSA. Tiamo, what is your immediate insight? What is your immediate thought when you listen to this this case study? What do you take from this?
Heartwarming is my first word. You know, Mwagi, running a business, especially a specialized business of this nature, small and yet dependent on the customers, it's really hard. It's not an easy journey. And given the fact that the case studies that we've heard, if you draw parallels on them, you can see that their social upliftment and their social engagement with the real world showcase that they have taken into account their social responsibilities, obligations, and expectation to the market, including the waterfront, the V&A, who actually make sure that they are supported in many of those fronts. Yes, in 2020, when that lockdown bell rang, it was an unexpected disaster that could drive everyone across the board to foreclosure. But the experience and the resilience that these two cases have built indicate to us that where there is a will, there must be a way. To avoid disruption, make sure that you comply so that you can gain more opportunities. You know, it's that choice that the flower shop lady has made. And futuristically, looking at the growth, what are the downstream or the upstream and the downstream disruptions in the value chain? You know what? Not necessarily downsizing, but looking at the whole risk landscape and saying, I'll stop, I won't stockpile, but futuristically, I'll make sure that I issue or I sell my products in the wider variety of businesses. Okay,
Thank you, Tiamo.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's great. Thanks for that insight. I'd like to go now to Lita Kuta. I'm going to call you an icon in supplier development, Lita. You're so well known, I almost think I don't need to introduce you, but basically Director of Enterprise and Supplier Development at Tiger Brands. Yeah, what does this mean for you, Lita? Sustainability, ethics, yeah, how do you relate to these case studies?
Yeah. Firstly, I'm a Cape Townian. I was born and grew up from Langa. So when you talk issues of transformation in the Western Cape, my home province, it really excites me because I know when I go back home every time, it's not easy. It's not an easy. So for me, Henry, really, I take my hat off. I mean, Waterfront is a destination that I grew up going in. And obviously, you see a lot of white people going in there because they've got the money to spend. And you also kind of like see a lot of white suppliers and the shops. So you're almost growing this thought, where is the space for our own, you know, Black, African, colored community, Indian communities that are in the Western Cape to participate from this 36 billion rand, you know, precinct that contributes 2%. So for me, the first thing and foremost is I think what Henry has done from an ethical, because issues of ethics are not just about doing the right thing from corruption, right? Because normally when you talk ethics, people think corruption, but also is about inclusiveness. How do you make sure you build an economy that is inclusive, that benefits every member of society? You know, how does the V&A make sure that the community of the Western Cape benefits right? Secondly, issues of local sourcing. I mean, you made an example about what you used to procure that was bought in China, and now you've localized that. You know, that localization creates jobs for the province, right? And again, it's an ethical issue, right? In terms of, do you buy local when you can, or you do just import these things, you know? And making that decision to make sure that you buy and you promote localization becomes very critical. The third part about it's also ethical to have a sustained supply chain. Because when COVID ends, the question that I think Henry and the management are thinking, who is going to be the crafters that are going to have survived COVID? Because when people are coming back, who's going to be selling? So issues of then supporting them during that phase when there is no trade, because we all know what has happened with COVID, you know, and the country being on lockdown, becomes not only the right thing to do, but the sustainability of the precinct itself, right? Because there will be some tourists who came 4 years ago and bought something maybe from Asha or Helena, and when they come back, when they don't see them there will be a bit of disappointment, right? So part of making sure that your product line that was there pre-COVID is also available. It talks to issues of ethics. And then the other part about ethics is not just what the V&A does, is also you know, dealing with companies that are, you know, compliant, because there's a lot of ethics around compliance. You know, you need companies that are paying tax, because we know as a country, we are a country that's got a lot of unemployment, and we need to collect as much tax as possible. And entrepreneurs are a source of tax for the state. So getting those companies to be compliant is actually helping the fiscus, which is pretty much very important for the country. And also, I'm happy with the story that now, you know, from what Asha was saying, is that she's able to open other markets because of the compliance. It just shows you that doing the right thing also opens up the business, expands it. It's good for her and her business, because she's going to hire more people. It's going to be good for the country, because now we'll be able to collect more taxes and be able to invest in those members of society, which we all know that are very vulnerable.
Thank you, Lita. I think I'm going to sum that up in ethics is doing the right thing. It's the right thing to do. Thank you so much for that. And I know that this is very key and very dear to your heart in the work that you do at Tiger Brand. So thank you for that lovely insight. I'm going to move on now to Lola Adekanya. So Lola is the Africa head for a very interesting organization that works globally on corruption, or anti-corruption, I suppose, anti-corruption, governance, and ethics through all spheres of society. Yes, Lola, any thoughts from you? How does doing the right thing illustrated in the waterfront translate into the rest of Africa and maybe into the globe?
Thank you very much, Kathy. This case study resonates with me so much, and I'll just start from the last thing you were saying, that, you know, ethics is doing the right thing. I want to start from there because, you know, most of the folks listening and most of us who work in corporates really work in the compliance space, right? And sometimes compliance can seem very, you know, mundane. It can feel like checking the box, and we sort of lose the connection. But something happened, something important happened during the COVID-19 period. I think for those of us in the anti-corruption space, going back to the 60s and 70s, we knew that, you know, big business had lost the trust of consumers and customers. And, you know, we're trying to change that. The US passed the FCPA in '77. And it still continues to be a major discussion for us, where we say, you know, do big businesses really care about ethics? Do they really care about, you know, the small business? Do they really care about sustainability? But COVID did something. COVID shifted the paradigm for compliance officers to actually come back and realize ethics is actually doing the right thing, and not just compliance, like, you know, meeting the bare minimum of what the regulation says, but actually going the extra mile, just as Henry described they did at the waterfront. And I really want to commend, you know, the organization for going the extra mile to say, look, we have a buffer, we can survive this period if it lasts about a year, but what about the small businesses in our network? That's a value chain we need to preserve and support. And I want to sum up, you know, what compliance, ethics, and integrity should be. We should think about, you know, how we should think about it, what it should be in our minds. I think we shouldn't think about it as an end in itself. We should think about it as a means to a better life. We should think about it as a means to achieving, SDG 2030 goals, the sustainability goals, or the Africa we want, the AU, Africa Union Agenda of 2063. That's the goal. And so if that's how we think about compliance, ethics, and integrity, then corporates have to start thinking like the waterfront. How can we do better? How can we not only comply with regulations? Because here, the waterfront was not thinking about, making sure that they're in compliance with the tax regulations and then the new health restrictions and we're making sure everyone is wearing masks. And if they can't afford to buy the masks, then, we'll have to shut down your business. That wasn't the thinking. The thinking was sustainability, development, productivity. And so Ashra's story really resonates with me because that's why, SIPE put together, the resources to develop the Ethics First initiative, where we know that there are lots of informal businesses out there that can get more opportunity, become more productive, create more opportunities for job, increase their productivity if they formalize. A lot of times, there's no motivation to formalize, and it was good to hear this case study about how Ashra did and benefited from it.
Thank you so much, Lola. Yes, thank you. I'm always delighted to get a global view, and yeah, thank you for those kind words too, and I second them to the waterfront as well. So maybe just the last comment then from Lisa Pierce. So Lisa is the manager of Environmental Health and Safety Unit at the IDC. Lisa, I may be particularly going to ask you on the sustainability issue. So what jumped out from this case from sustainability, ethics and sustainability?
Thank you. So I think, wow, this is a wonderful case study, and I'm so glad to hear that the V&A Waterfront has been looking at things like procurement within their buildings and their suppliers. And what resonated with me from this case study, firstly, really was the example of not buying from China, because that's the easiest thing to do, but looking at ways that they could actually procure locally. And only looking at the Christmas decorations as a first example, but I'm quite certain that has been extended or would have been extended to suppliers of food and suppliers of packaging and suppliers of waste management services. So from a sustainability perspective, I think that is really, really encouraging, and our corporates really should be looking more deeply and more innovatively for opportunities to localize their supply. And I want to maybe just also mention that we saw from IDC side during COVID, during the pandemic, how supply chains were so severely affected because supply chains were very much global or like international or very regional, but very specifically tied to bigger regions. And then COVID disrupted that so significantly. And many organizations felt the impact of that suddenly their supplier was just not able to get the products to them just because there were restrictions in travel and in goods being moved from one region to the next. So actually what I want to say that sustainability, as much as we think about sustainability and ESG factors as being a good thing to do, and it is ethical and it is correct to think of it that way. But what we are seeing now is that it's become a hygiene factor for businesses. Business cannot operate without having these things in place anymore. And I really want to say that it stands out from the case study that having a sustainability mindset has obviously enabled the business to carry on, even with being able to be a bit creative around business model and suppliers. So I think that's definitely something to focus on, and we see sustainability as being core to business.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, and so thank you to the panelists for your input, and thank you so much to Henry for your case study. I think it's a fantastic example of inclusive growth and really spreading the benefit through small suppliers in the region, and that makes you stand out as a retail precinct. And so yeah, all force to you going forward. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to a very different case study, and so I'd like to invite Cliff Frostowski from BIDVEST AFCOM to come forward. And also then his supplier that he's been working very closely with, Bruce and Tabisi. But first of all, to Cliff. Yeah, so your case is very different. So rather than looking at spreading the benefits through many hundreds of small suppliers, you had a very deliberate strategy to work with one key supplier. And I'm interested to know what it was. What was a problem that you kind of identified right at the beginning when you thought about this process? What was it? What was a problem that you actually identified that you wanted to try to resolve?
Okay, hi Catherine, and hi everybody participating in this case study. First of all, just to put it into context, I'll give you a bit of an overview about BIDVEST AFCOM. We are a company that is involved, and we are the leader, we believe, in the manufacture, distribution, and provisioning of innovative packaging and fastening solutions to the commerce, service, mining, and agricultural sectors. We've been in business for 93 years, established in 1928, and to date we are actually the longest standing member of the BIDVEST Group. We employ 314 staff members across 9 sales branches and 3 factories. I think being part of such a significant and diverse group, the challenge that we had was that traditionally business would look to possibly achieve their supplier development objectives using or procuring services and products from typically businesses such as stationary businesses, businesses offering cleaning services, hygiene, security, printing, office furniture, etc., etc. Now, the challenge within BIDVEST is that BIDVEST actually owns businesses that participate in every single one of these sectors. So clearly, for us, it was important to try and find or develop a supplier that could supply us, which wouldn't compete with our own sister companies. So our objective was really to try and find a significant supplier that really did not compete with us.
Great, thank you. And so you really came up with such a big, bold strategy. And what, if you could just tell me what exactly was that strategy? I'm just going to move to the forward. You came up with a model that you're particularly keen on seeing replicated. Do you want to explain a little bit about this model that you've developed? Okay,
I think to start off with, first of all, what was critical to us was that we wanted to try and achieve an authentic BE compliance partner, if you like. And what was very important was that we weren't really interested in box ticking or fronting or anything of that nature, which is obviously a problem that we do see, which is fairly prevalent. We wanted to create something which was significant and that we believed was real transformation. So what we did was we looked, first of all, we looked for spend that was not spend which could be deemed to be an operational expenditure. We looked at something which could be significant in our lives, and that obviously would be something which was part of our cost of sales. We identified being a sort of a very broad based supplier of a significantly varied product. We looked at the various groupings of product that we supply, and we identified the film product. And what I mean by that is the stretch and shrink industry, not the movies, as a fairly untransformed industry in our country. And we then came up with a model. And I think what was critical is that in order for this model to be effective, you need to have really all the participants. So really from our perspective, we identified that there was a particular supplier, an untransformed business that could participate in the structure and could effectively transfer in the manufacturing capability and expertise.
We lost Cliff. Okay, we seem to have had a break from Cliff, so I'm actually going to then move on to comment from Bruce. So Bruce, you were the accelerator they call. So you were the small suppliers, no longer a small supplier, I have to say, but you were the person that they identified. And I'm really interested to know from you, what did that mean to you? Give us a little bit of context. Who were you back in the day when this whole journey began?
Morning, Catherine, and morning to all the participants in this case study. Okay, my name is Toby Bruce Ntlego. I went to UKZN, studied a BCom accounting, majored in finance, marketing, management, and economics. I started my career at Procter & Gamble. I think one of my greatest highlights in my career at Procter & Gamble was the fact that I was very integral in creating a bottom line distribution model for them on how to actually access the township market more effectively. And in so doing, I got rewarded and recognized by being awarded a very prestigious award that gets given to about 2.5% of employees on a global scale, which was obviously a P&G 100 machine shares. In 2008, I had an opportunity which was provided to me by Procter & Gamble to actually start up my own bottom-end distribution company, which was effectively a cash van operation, distributing their products into townships. And that business was called Pavati Trading. It was a services business, and we were doing and distribution for them. From 2008 up until 2011, we took that company from a zero turnover, myself and my partners, to over 100 million rand in turnover, employing about 80 people on a full-time basis and operating in 3 different sites. And then came 2014. We obviously, unfortunately, that contract was moved to a multinational company, and it was no longer. They invited us to participate with them. The company is still around today, called Diplomat, but it just didn't make sense for us and for our entrepreneurial journey where we are. And we had to look and take stock of obviously the lessons we had learned for those 6 years operating that business. And one of the key things that we really picked up was, especially in this kind of economy, is that you need to own your means to production. So the problem that we wanted to answer in our journey, our entrepreneurial journey, was moving towards manufacturing. And within that year, between 2014 to 2015, we then got introduced to the BIDVEST group, and in particular to BIDVEST AFCOM, who then identified us as an ideal candidate for the model that between themselves, their service provider called African IQ, ourselves, and obviously our technical partner, whom BIDVEST assisted us to identify. We started on this journey of transforming from being a service provider company into a manufacturing entity, and then hence Pavati Plastics or Pavati PSA was then born. That process, started from 2015. Cliff, I think, was still trying to explain the model before you broke off. I think he's back online. So before I get into explaining our journey, maybe it'd be ideal to get context from his perspective of co-players.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I think that'd be great. Let's just go back then to Cliff, and let's get that model up there again. Maybe you can just finish off explaining on the model. Then Cliff, thank you. Nope, looks like Cliff's gone again.
Okay. No,
you there?
I'm here, I think. I'm back.
Yes, you're back.
Okay, I'll speak quickly. So as I discussed, the Capacity Accelerator was really the company that was going to provide the manufacturing capability and expertise. We needed a new co, and that's obviously the beneficiary of the structure. And in this case, it's Pavati Plastics, which was a startup entity that would be 51% Black owned, and they would obviously be the recipient of the manufacturing capability and expertise. Bruce, in this instance, was the shareholder and the CEO of Pavati. BIDVEST AFCOM would sign an initial 3-year offtake agreement or procurement contract with Pavati. And what's very significant is that this contract would be based upon normal commercial criteria of price, product, and service. So at no stage would we be prejudicing ourselves, in inverted commas, by supporting this new entity. It would have to be on a normal commercial basis. And on the strength of our 3-year agreement and relationship that we developed with this new co, ABSA in this instance would provide the funding. They would be the funder, and they would provide an initial credit line to fund the contribution of capital equipment by Bruce to Pavati. So effectively, the model is that the capacity accelerator, PSA Plastics, transfers in certain equipment into NewCo, and that would be matched by an equal contribution from, in this instance, Bruce, who would provide an equal contribution of capital equipment based upon the funding of ABSA. And that's essentially the model. I think the success of the model has been that within a very short period of time, within in fact 3 years, this particular entity, Pavati, has become our single largest supplier, and has proved itself to be a credible supplier, and is a fully fledged business now.
Thank you, Cliff. I think for me, what's really important for people to understand is that this wasn't just a case of taking an existing white-owned business and making it BEE compliant. What you really did here was you identified a gap in the market for a new business to grow. And I think the key here is that currently only 30% of Pavati Plastics revenue actually comes from BIDVEST AFCOM. And so the business has grown far beyond what it was in the first place to be a business and a success in its own right. And I think that that's really key to understand in this model. Thank you. Thanks for that, Cliff. So let's just then go back to Bruce. And Bruce, yeah, you were just starting, you had explained to us that you'd already had a long journey. You were well established, somebody with a reputation. I love the fact that you came out of corporate. I think people often miss that successful businesses are started by entrepreneurs that have good solid insiders information as to how a big company works. So I think you've explained that really nicely. I think let's just move on to what did it mean. There is a timeline that was showing there that it wasn't an overnight success. It has been quite a long journey, but maybe just quickly run us through that timeline very briefly, and then maybe let's get to where you are now. So what has this growth meant? What transformation has happened for you as a company, and maybe for you as an individual as well?
Okay, yeah, back to the timeline. I think just adding on to what Cliff was saying, obviously our technical partner, Capacity Accelerator, in this particular case, had different technology to what the AFCOM offtake required us to deliver on. So of the 80% of the offtake, about 20% of that we could actually manufacture with the existing assets that our Capacity Accelerator had, and hence why the need then for ABSA to actually come on board to assist us to fund new capital equipment that will enable us to take advantage of the opportunity provided to us by BIDVEST in this particular case. ABSA came on board. It took us a good 18 months to move from obviously conceptual stage to a final funding stage with them, because as an institution as well, this was I think a very innovative model, and everybody still needed to navigate around it to try and understand how to use the current existing credit criteria, which were normal business banking requirements, versus looking at this in an innovative way. Because I mean, the initial funding that we requested from ABSA was actually 50 million, but the appetite as a proof of concept ended up at about 30 million to assist us into acquiring obviously the new assets. What assisted us obviously by having an existing infrastructure to plug into was that, especially one of the biggest challenges that I think we as entrepreneurs don't realize is that as much as you might have the equipment is a car. Without fuel, the car can't move. So credit lines were the biggest challenge. I mean, the likes of Sasol, 1, 3, 4, 5 year credit trading history. in order to be able to give a new entrance into the market sufficient credit lines to fill up a very, very hungry machine. I mean, a 30 million rand machine requires at least 30 million rand of working capital just to get it running. So that's where also the assistance of the existing PSA business also helped us with, and that we can tap into their existing relationships with raw material suppliers. And by September 2017, our new equipment had arrived, and we could then, by end of that year, take advantage of supplying to AFCOM beginning of 2018. In that year, we also then moved with ABSA. We had actually, because that been part of the journey, had moved from being just an enterprise development initiative to ABSA's perspective into being a supplier to them, because within their own supply chain, they identified that they actually consume products that are made from the raw material that makes plastic, and your bank bags, your cash management bags that they move money with. And truth and behold, we didn't have the capacity to do it, neither ourselves nor our technical partner had the equipment. And then ABSA threw in additional money to assist us to acquire those assets now to also get into that new market. So we went from being a new entrance into the market, because our objective, as I said, what we were trying to answer for our own entrepreneurial journey was moving away from a services related business, which is Pavati trading, because I mean, overnight, a contract can be moved from one distribution center to the next one. But being a critical partner in a business like we were with AFCOM, it's as you build your capabilities and as you build your innovation and you start being a good supplier, it's very hard for them to swap suppliers unless we can't supply. By 2018, we had employed, as part of our strategy, youth, mostly youth, into the new company. The old company used to employ about 90 people, and as things stand today, we are close to 200 people as the two joint companies. All new investment is obviously coming from the Pavati side, because our partner, and I think that's where AFCOM also got it right, is that the partner that they linked us up to was at the sunset of his entrepreneurial journey, while we are still at a very active stage. So there's a gradual exit strategy for them as well, as we are taking advantage more and more into the sector. When we came in, it was myself and my wife, who's my partner. Our objective was to really be a specialist in the packaging environment, not just come in on secondary packaging. Yes, secondary packaging was our foot into market, but we really wanted to expand into specialized product, import replacement products, etc. And already in 2018, we had started conversations with the Department of Trade and Industry, as well as with IDC and ABSA, on looking at how can we create a local, black-owned, black-managed manufacturing entity that can take advantage of the imports that are coming in. That new project took us a good 20 months to actually get to an approval stage, and by December 2020, IDC, ABSA, and DTI actually approved a capital expenditure of close to 150 million rand, which is what we're currently busy with now, expanding our factory into specialized products that I think Lita and his colleagues, and you will see also part of that we're tactically targeted to bring into our books, was to answer the one thing, which is, as much as locally we've got a lot of print houses, we've got very few specialized film converters locally on your polyprop substrates, etc., that are utilized in a lot of food packaging, and that's the place where our investment is actually taking us into. We've just taken.
Lovely, that's lovely. Thank you, Bruce. I'm going to just let's just quickly show a couple of images of where you are now, because I think that the scale of your operations is really significant. You know, this is really a business that started small and has massively grown, not only to supply to Pavati AFCOM, but to really to supply well beyond that. And I think this is really a success story at scale. I think it is really a model. I'm really delighted to be able to showcase to everybody as something that we can look to replicate. So thank you so much, Bruce, for that insight. I think it's important to understand that it's not an overnight success, that this has been a long, hard journey, and it's been able to be possible with the close partnership and support of BIDVEST AFCOM, and then of course with the funding assistance of ABSA. So thank you so much for that insight. Very, very interesting case study. I want to go now to Tiamo Mokolani. Again, obviously, I'm going to give the floor to you as a representative of ABSA. ABSA played a very key role in the growth of this, in the massive growth of this entity. And I just wondered if you had any particular very tight response about the possible conflicts or anything like that, anything that flags here for you in procurement.
You know, this story, it's very, very impressive because it moves from zero to hero, you know, in terms of growth, in terms of the model, which is scalable and can be replicated in many facets. However, I just want to caution something against the fast growth. You know, in terms of this fast growth, sometimes we diversify too quickly that we end up having multiple products and then we're not able to deliver, because the true growth lies within that specialist core element that Bruce was talking about, which is their core business, which made the growth to be so significant. And going on further, I would like to say that the same model that is replicated from the BIDVEST group, it is now in the hands of Pavati as a group, and sharing is caring. Some of those non-core, if I may call it them that, can actually be used to introduce a model in order to support the other small businesses going forward. And kudos to you, well done. Simply put, do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiamo. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. I second those thoughts. I'd like to move now to Lita. I think, Lita, this becomes interesting for you, maybe with your aggregators model, this kind of rapid scale up. It's a little different, or maybe it's the same. What does this mean for you? What can you take out of this that might be valuable in your own supply chain?
Thanks. Firstly, I must also commend Cliff for the work well done, and also from Bruce for actually taking the challenge and really be able not only to take the opportunity, but to actually execute it, because that's the biggest challenge in our spaces. We create these opportunities. So for me, if I would talk one or two things about the elements that Cliff spoke about, which are very much entrenched in the model that we use. One of the challenges in Africa generally, and specifically South Africa, is that we are caught between two worlds, right? We are caught between what is called economic participation and economic transformation. And sometimes we think the two are interchangeable. They are not. Because when you talk about economic participation, it's getting as many people in. That's where you pretty much have a lot of people participating, but you might find that in certain industries, they don't. I could have in agriculture 1,000 farmers, but they won't even supplying 1% of what we want, right? Purely because they are too small scale. And on the economic transformation, once you've made that choice that you want to transform, because I suppose from the BIDVEST side, that was the decision that we want to make a meaningful shift. What then they did, which again is something I subscribed, they looked into their cost of sales, which that is tied into your core business, right? And said, what am I buying and what am I buying at scale? And that is important into this business, because that already means issues of sustainability are guaranteed. Anything you buy from the cost of sale is something that is very meaningful to the organization. And then the normal commercial arrangement. Because part of the challenge with ESD, I mean, the work that we do, is that we handle people with such soft gloves, such that they don't end up growing and be able to raise the 100 million that Bruce was talking about. Because for almost every problem they have, they run back. They are not resilient, because we are always there to catch them, you know, to guide them. And operating on normal commercial terms, which we do at Tiger. Some of our suppliers, if they don't supply us our volumes, they are shorting us, right? And they get sued, right? And I said they mustn't remove it, because that must be an anxiety of an entrepreneur if they want to make it. And making sure that we support them, that they don't have a force majeure issue in breaking that contract. That's our job. We shouldn't change the terms of the game, because when they grow and they get to a certain stage and you start now wanting to normalize it, most of them will collapse, because at the beginning they were not set up and started through normal trading and commercial terms, right? He's also mentioned a long haul, 3 years, 5 years commitment, because Bruce was never going to make it if you've got a 1 year view. You always have to have a longer view, because he is going to make mistakes along the way, but you want to make sure he's got a runway to grow. But he has to catch up very quickly. Collaboration became key, because, you know, which again from Tiger, we are not a financing organization. No one will grow big in our supply chain unless we've got financiers coming in. We have no choice in that, which I think then, you know, Cliff have done that to bring, you know, upside into the deal to make sure that there is funding. That's one part which Cliff did, yeah. But there's the other part from Bruce in terms of he had the expertise, the competence, right? And sometimes entrepreneurs come to us and want them to build the expertise. And unfortunately, you can't scale people which still need to learn the basics of business, right? So when you're talking scaling, you gotta bring people that have already got the wealth of information, the knowledge and the expertise, and also then you can invest in their infrastructure, well knowing that they've got the competency. And part of what you said, I think, Catherine, drawing also from corporate is also going to work. Some of the people that have worked, that they've experienced working environment, they are cheaper to invest on the skill side because they've already, you know, acquired that skill, right? But that model works when you talk about scaling and, you know, building these models. But when you talk economic participation, where you want to try to get as many people, that's where your incubators come in. That is where you train as many people. You start them with non-core, hoping that they'll be able to grow. So for me, I can resonate with the model. It's got all the right elements. My last point on this is that as Africa, we are never going to grow if we do not share these models. You know, as from Tiger, as doing what I'm doing, I need to make sure I can work with my colleagues at Pioneer, at RCL. You know, I presented, for example, to McCain's Exco. I'm presenting to, you know, the SPEC group. We need to share this information. There is no competition in development because we're all in the same boat. We need our society uplifted. And if I figured out something and Cliff has figured out something, we need to tell others so that they can actually replicate. It minimizes mistakes, but it also propels, you know, in terms of building small businesses that are scalable far more quicker.
Lovely, thank you, Lita. I think you raised some really, really important points. Are we too soft on supply development? I think what's really key, a key element of the success of the Pavati Plastics is that they operated on purely commercial basis. And what I like about that is an inbuilt assumption that they were able to do it. And so that is definitely one of the really key elements of scaling a significantly successful business, and one that is central, one of those central suppliers, not the kind of sidearm story of the softer touch. But I do think in supply development you kind of need both, right? Because I know in your space in agriculture, if you were totally tough and you said, "Listen, guys, shape up or ship out," you know, you're gonna cut out a lot of your small suppliers. So I do think that these both elements, the softer touch for the small guys and the real tough commercial stance for the big players there's a place for both. I think let's now go to some questions from our delegates. I do see one there from Charles. He was asking this question of Cliff. Who actually drove the process of getting your deal conceptualized? Who actually drove this model? Was it procurement? Was it you know, Exco? Who actually was central to designing and driving the model?
Okay, thank you. So we did use an external consulting company who assisted us through this process. But from an internal BIDVEST AFCOM perspective, you know, we have a very, very flat structure. So really, I was the key driver, being the MD, etc., and that's really how we operate. So we don't have departments of people. It was really driven by myself and my core team, Once we had conceptualized the idea, it was just a function of getting the parties in place.
Great, excellent. Thanks for that, Cliff. So keep questions coming from the delegates if there are. Please just pop them in your chat and they'll come through to us. I want to ask. I really want to put a question to Henry. This model that BIDVEST has shared is very different to the model that you've got, Henry. Are there elements from this that you think can translate into your environment?
Absolutely, Catherine, and particularly looking into our supply chain within the construction industry. The construction industry is synonymous with sort of struggles to actively transform some of the big suppliers, with a number of our big contracts going to the usual suppliers. So I definitely think there's room for this model, and it's a really sort of efficient, I think an efficient model to scale impact within one supplier. I think that the one challenge that we do however face is that both our supply chain and precinct is so diverse. And to manage resource and capacity of a wide variety of sectors, often you need to sort of manage what is within your locus of control. But the model is there, and I'm really thankful for the ability to learn from Cliff and Bruce today.
Great, excellent. I'm going to come to Lola just now, but before I go there, I'd like to ask Ashra. Do you believe that you, as a small supplier, are kind of getting a soft touch, or do you feel that you're having to negotiate on purely commercial terms?
I would say both. Just listening to the candidates here, I've learned so much, especially with the area where the waterfront management supported me in terms of being compliant. It just opened more doors and opportunities for me. So yes, thank you to everybody that's here this morning. I've learned so much. Being compliant, before I always felt that, is it necessary to do that? I was always scared to approach SARS, to be honest. But being compliant and the guidelines that the waterfront management gave me, it just opened more doors and opportunities for me.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much for that input. Yeah, Lola, this model on a global scale, what's your feeling about it? Being able to use this and replicate it and hone it and improve it in order to scale, inclusive growth in Africa.
I've just been enjoying having a front row seat at this excellent example of collaboration to solve real world problems for small businesses. That's essentially what this is. We come together and we say we should be doing this. We should collaborate to solve these problems. But what that really looks like when folks like BIDVEST and ABSA and Pavati and the teams that have been working on this kind of model come together to develop a system a model like this and implement it. Often you don't even anticipate the unintended consequences, and I'm sure they've had to reiterate and make changes as they went along. They must have had a tough time trying to figure out how to select the right small business to invest in. They're looking at competence. They're looking at what is the long-term sustainability of this particular business. How do we make sure we're not excluding other businesses that might be equally, able to meet the objectives of the program. And when you think about it, in South Africa and many other African countries, access to finance is a major challenge for small businesses. But in this model, they didn't only get access to finance. Like Bruce mentioned, they've been talking with banks to access finance or credit lines to scale the business. But that has been a challenge. And I was just looking it up. South Africa ranks about the 4th or 5th country where bank charges are the highest. So this is a critical issue for small businesses. But here's a model that doesn't only give access to finance. It gives access to infrastructure that they even need, and Bruce was talking about that earlier. It gives access to other folks in the industry that can help them build their capacity and develop their skills quickly. And again, it also gave them, access to business opportunities, the 2 to 3 year purchase orders that would definitely be coming from BIDVEST, and other organizations would ensure sustainability. And I was really happy to hear that the terms that they engaged with the new co on are the commercial terms. I can't stress that enough when Letha was talking about that. But indeed, again, you experienced the challenge you talked about, Catherine, where you want to make sure that you're not treating small businesses with kids' gloves, but you at the same time you're giving them enough support to survive. Yep. And that's the balance to strike that I think this kind of model really helps those of us in the development space learn from, so we know what to expect when we're investing in a project like this. We know that there will be these kinds of challenges, and the experts on the ground would know how to manage and navigate these challenges so that the solutions and the outcomes are sustainable and replicable in other settings. So really excited to listen to.
Thank you, Lola. Thank you for those comments. I think one of you've touched on a couple of things is selection, and I know we don't have time, unfortunately, to go through it in detail, but I do know that Cliff and his team sat for a long time making sure that they had identified the right person. The same thing with Bruce, making sure that it's a match. That isn't something that happens overnight, and you're certainly not going to invest in a long-term journey in partnership with somebody that you don't, unless you know, like, and trust them. I think the other element of this model, and probably the V&A one as well, is that it's a true partnership. It's when BIDVEST AFCOM came alongside Pavati Plastics that they were able together to raise the finance that was necessary for their growth. And I think that that's really key, is that access to finance isn't just somebody putting their hands out. It's really about having a network of people that can support and motivate for that, because that's the way that obviously investors are sure that they've reduced risk. So maybe I just had one question from Vusi. He's just asking Cliff, how did BIDVEST overcome the barrier or reluctance of your current operations and procurement managers in encouraging them to move forward from the old way that they did business to dealing with this new supplier? Did you have a challenge there, and if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I think first of all, what is important in a model like this is that as a responsible company, we need to have multiple suppliers. So we never for once excluded all our suppliers, and in fact today we have competitors to Bruce. We don't buy exclusively from Pavati, but they do get the lion's share. But I think what is important is that we have to keep them honest, in inverted commas. We have to keep them on their toes, and we have to make sure that the commercial principles are in place. So it wasn't, a switch off of everybody else and a switch on of Pavati. It was a phase in over a period of time as the relationship evolved and developed, so we could obviously shift more business their way. So that was the first thing. Secondly, again, I think it's a function of structure. And I think, as I mentioned before, BIDVEST AFCOM is a very flat structure. We don't have layers of procurement departments, etc. It's literally a function of me talking to the guy who sits opposite me and discussing that we're going to support this particular supplier because there's a good reason to do so. So really, in our environment, it was fairly easy to manage. But I think what is critical is that you must be responsible in terms of how you procure, and you must have multiple suppliers, etc., and ensure that the basic principles are in place.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cliff. Well, that's all we have time for, folks. So I'm going to have to close it there. I want to thank the presenters and the panelists for their really insightful input. Fantastic case studies. I'm so delighted to have been able to share those, and really encourage you, all of you on the call, to engage with each other, continue with these questions. And I want to maybe leave with one note on both of these case studies. They're driven by EXCO. The support comes from the top, from the very top. And it's really key. It's something that has been shown all through the supplier development processes, is the businesses where supplier development is made a key strategic advantage at executive level are the ones that are really able to deliver value, not only for the small suppliers, but also for the companies themselves. So with then, as a last comment, I'd like to remind you all to listen in to the awarding of the 2021 ABSA Business Day Supply Development Awards that will be hosted on the 18th of November. Go to the website sdawards.coza to find out more. And lastly, again, thank you so much to ABSA. You play such an incredibly significant role in this sector, and I'm really delighted and very grateful for the support that you give to these awards. They're iconic, and they're iconic because you're part of it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and we'll meet again at the next Insiders Track. Goodbye.